The following video contains spoilers. We suggest watching the episodes alone in the dark. Hello, Wolfpack! We're back, and we're ready to kickstart summer vacation with a look back at a summertime Goosebumps tale. Our voters have spoken, so we're taking a look at the final Goosebumps story arc, the two-part horror story, Deep Trouble 2. Yeah, Deep Trouble 2. Just to clarify, this story arc is not an adaptation of the first Deep Trouble story. This is instead a very loose adaptation of Deep Trouble 2, but it does take some elements from the first book and has a lot of creative liberties, setting itself apart from the sequel novel too. The original Deep Trouble book was actually about a family known as the Deeps saving a mermaid from the evil scientists and hunters threatening to cut it open for scientific research. But the sequel was a whole new adventure where the Deep family faced off against another mad scientist testing an illegal toxin to sell off to the black market. This episode is more closer to the second book, and the mermaid plot was totally phased out in favor of the latter story. But don't worry, if you want a supernatural mermaid story, then check out Pirates of the Caribbean 4, Dead Man's franchise, because that's about as close as you'll get to a Deep Trouble 1 adaptation compared to this. But long story short, this is really Deep Trouble 2 and not the first book, like how so many people unfamiliar with R.L. Stine's book series thought it was. There is no indication if the first story ever occurred in the show's universe, and it's not even referenced. It just heads straight into the second adventure of the Deep family, but does a pretty decent job at setting up the main characters for non-book fans, and does stand up on its own very well. Why would the show start off with the second adventure of the Deep family and not the first one? Well, I can only assume that the Goosebumps producers didn't have enough of a high budget to make a realistic-looking mermaid and sea monsters come to life on the big screen. As proof of this, the CGI in this story is not exactly Star Wars levels of impressive, and I can believe that the show just made it a practical choice rather than having any hatred against the first book. That's it. They just didn't have enough money for the huge effects, and thought the second book would be funner for the kids. That being said, this tale is often seen as one of the more average Goosebumps tales produced. Not many fans praised it as the show's greatest story ever, but not all thought it was the worst story ever either. What impact did the Deep Trouble episodes have on the franchise then? We'll see soon enough. I also feel it's important to note that this story was also the series finale of the beloved Goosebumps horror show. Yep, this is the last ever episode featured on the series before we lost Goosebumps for good. Was it a good last episode of our favorite children's classic? We'll see, so grab your snorkelers because we're about to dive right in. Was this series finale a fun summertime adventure of sheer terror, or was it a cold fish shoved in the back of the freezer? Let's find out. This is my review on the series finale two-parter to the iconic Goosebumps TV show, Deep Trouble. So, our episode opens up at, where else? The beach, where we see our kid hero, Sheena Deep, fishing for fish. But it sadly goes nowhere, and she goes on a Homer Simpson rage.
Hello? Sis? Let's go. I'm not gonna sit here all day, alright? Okay, I give up. Nice quit.
The old fishing hole. So peaceful and relaxing. Doesn't even matter if I
the jaw shark appears, where it tries to kill her. And yes, they do play the Jaws theme and everything, while she somehow fails to notice the 2-foot shark fin rushing her way.
I got one! I got one! Gotcha! Great. Here you go, Tina.
Come on, guys, wait up! Oh, dang, I got honey all over my legs.
After finally spotting the great white, she very slowly paddles away from the shark, but it's revealed to have all been a harmless prank by her idiot brother Billy Deep, controlling a toy with the world's largest remote just to scare her.
Billy, what are you doing? So they call you Sheen in the jungle? Just in your face. Help, shark! Somebody, please!
Wow, what lovable main characters. I look forward to watching you all die. You're probably wondering how a teenage Sheena fell for such an obvious prank since great white sharks can't swim in shallow waters since they're too big and would lose breathing water, but Sheena is kind of slow on the uptake like that.
You big dummy. Ah, what a dummy.
The show does not do a very good job at positive first impressions on the Deep siblings. In the books, while Billy and Sheena Deep did have their petty arguments, they were good-natured peeps underneath their goofy demeanor and did pull off heroic feats. But on the show, they're kind of bland and downgraded to the oh-so-classic bickering idiots. Which makes me sad since they're supposed to be the relatable kid heroes that the children are meant to see themselves as. But nope, they go for a more B-movie feel. In the books, Billy was supposed to be the older sibling, while Sheena was the younger one, but the show pointlessly switches that around and makes Sheena the older sibling, while Billy's the foolish younger one. It's a small change, but it's no big deal since they were only 2 years apart, but whatever, pointlessness. This is also just a minor nitpick, but the show makes constant references to Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, because that's also the name of our female hero. Yep, no lie, she's jokingly called Sheena, Queen of the Jungle a lot just because they share names. I only complain because this is a very dated reference that most children today are not going to get, since the Jungle Princess Sheena was an obscure old show that was on back when Goosebumps still aired on television in the 90s. I mean, do any kids or even adult viewers out there know who Sheena, Queen of the Jungle is? Because let me tell you, nobody is going to get that reference.
Is that why they call you Sheen in the jungle? Nothing to cry. Sheen in the jungle.
Sheen in the jungle.
Oh, good. Lots of references to a cheesy magic 90s show. That doesn't date this horribly. I'm sure all the kids today will know exactly who they're talking about. Right, House?
What you talking about, kitty cat?
Yeah, in short, it's about as dated as the 2000s Twilight Zone was. Anyways, Sheena cries about how bored she is because this place is so dull and she demands fun. Oh yeah, tropical private beach island where you have no homework, no work to do, and a beach all to yourself. Life surely sucks for you twits.
So scared of getting wet. Why'd you go fishing in the first place? I had to find something to do around here. It's so boring. Why did Mom and Dad stop us from Uncle Harold for the whole summer?
Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Just to make us hate them even more, Sheena also complains about how their uncle, the famous scientist Dr. Deep, treats them like kids.
Uncle Harold's pretty cool. He's
But just as Sheena anks on how nothing exciting happens around here, the kids find something exciting, where they uncover a ginormous shark tooth that conveniently washed up ashore on their island. They believe that their uncle, the scientist, Dr. Deep, can use this for his scientific research. But when they hear the Jaws theme playing again, they run off while something watches them from afar. They make it safely to the dry land, where they decide to look for their uncle, the scientist, in the most unlikely place, at his own house. Whoa, I never would have thought to look for their uncle in his house. Truly, these Wonder Kids are genius detectives. But they still somehow can't locate him, making them question where their uncle could have went to. However, they soon find some wet footprints that smell like seawater all over the place, while something stalks them from outside. Okay, I am going to take this scene and hold it for another criticism I have for later, because the fact that sea monsters have found and entered the Deep household is going to come back and bite this episode in the tail fin later. Good sign, right? The kids hear something rustling outside the house, where Billy goes out to see who's there with his trusty broomstick. But he finds nothing at all. Well, that was a complete waste of time. How the heck did giant sea monsters even evade the kid? They had wet footprints!
Great continuity!
Since some strange things are going on around here, the kids decide to look for Dr. Deep down in the dark, scary basement that's glowing ominously. Didn't Dr. Deep ever tell his kids to stay out of the basement? Oh wait, that was a different story. Well, why didn't he even lock the door? Oh, I have little curious kids roaming around this haunted island. Better leave my dangerous laboratory completely unlocked.
You big dummy.
So the kids find an admittedly cool science lab to show us how Dr. Deep studies ocean life and is secretly testing mutagen straight from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And to be fair, I do love how Goosebumps goes out of its way on the cool sets, since this ocean lab does look pretty cool. I love all the 30 fish tanks and chemistry tubes everywhere, since it does make a classic mad scientist lab setting. So good job, Goosebumps, your settings never disappoint. They soon find some weird mutagen and like colossal morons fight over it, before accidentally dropping it in Mr. Puff's tank. But they hear the doctors arriving and decide to hide in the broom closet to avoid getting into trouble. Or should I say, getting into deep trouble? We soon meet Dr. Deep and his business partner, Dr. John Ritter, dropping some exposition on a missing lab assistant named Louise, who has vanished without a trace, making Dr. Deep question if this experiment is worth the losses he's been having. But Dr. Ritter fights with him over how their secret project, D13, is at risk of failure, and they need to finish it since they're so close to success. But Dr. Deep is unsure. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Deep is a famous scientist who's pretty much a Diet Dr. Benton Quest clone, who is involved in life-changing scientific endeavors, while also bringing his mischievous, adventurous kids along for the ride. This Goosebumps tale is pretty much R.L. Stine's Johnny Quest episode. We have a team of silly, adventurous kid heroes and their brilliant scientist guardian going on life-threatening supernatural hijinks together, all while saving the day from evil villains who want to, you guessed it, take over the world.
Of course.
A cool concept, naturally, but the horror will be taking a back seat in favor of a science fiction turn this time around. Sorry to upset you, but nothing all that scary really happens in this R.L. Stine story. It's a science fiction plot rather than a grim horror story. We do get some scary mutant monsters later, but it's not a body horror kind of theme. A nice shift for a change, but I did not find anything in this episode scary at all, even when I was a little kitten. Which might make or break this quest for some, and it's only going to get even more polarizing once we get to part 2. So the adults leave before giving away too much plot, while the kids luckily find a picture of their uncle hanging out with the missing lab assistant. But before they can think about it, they hear a fish tank shattering outside. And see?
Look at the top of his head.
The weirdest pufferfish mutant you'll ever see in your life. Yeah, something you'll notice very quickly is that the effects in Deep Trouble are the worst the show has ever had. Now, it's not as bad as Teacher's Pet or the Beauty and the Beast remake, but it's something that gets too noticeable, even for the children under 7. Now, I will be nice and say that Goosebumps is super talented at most of their practical effects, but as you'll all see soon enough, their giant monsters have never been as good in comparison. In short, this giant pufferfish boss is super silly, and if you can believe it or not, this is just the tip of the iceberg for this tale's laughably dumb effects. So, how does Mr. Puff react to being transformed into a huge Ninja Turtles monster? He flips out and launches spear quills across the room to murder the kids. Wait, what? So, does the mutagen give the animals superpowers too, or what? This is actually the only time we see one of the mutant animals gaining powers it didn't have before, which is cool, but also a tad confusing, seeing as how it's never copied again. So the fish tries to spear the kids before it dies without any water, where like morons, they lock themselves up in the closet again to dodge the piercing spears. As you can see, it was clearly a smart move. But oh no, they see the doorknob is about to unlock, where it's revealed to be Dr. Deep and Pal showing up to save the kids. No, I really thought the fish mutant was the one opening the door. Seriously, did anyone think for a second that it was the fish mutant on the other side? It's a fish. They don't have fingers. And we see Dr. Ritter and Dr. Deep subdued the beast with a bag. A bag. A bag. Really, Goosebumps? An ordinary bag stopped the feral fish beast that can shoot arrows? Well, if it defeated the Care Bears, it can stop evil mutants too, I suppose. After rescuing the siblings, Dr. Deep then lectures the kids about not going into his science lab and grounds them for almost dying. Huh? Hey guy, are you not surprised about the mutagen transforming Mr. Puff into a Power Rangers monster? He's really telling the kids they're in deep trouble for screwing around in his lab. Granted, the kids shouldn't be playing in a death lab with toxic poisons, but again, why the hell didn't you lock the dang door, you moron?
You big dummy.
We also get this very bad fake-out moment where the show actually tries to make the audience think that the Deep's family maid might be evil. Yeah, the show really tries to convince you that this woman, who we're meeting for the very first time, is somehow a secret villain who wants vengeance on the Deeps. but it doesn't work. I'll get into why later. The kids defend themselves by showing their uncle the giant shark tooth they found earlier, stating how they came to ask him about it, but the doctor acts slightly suspicious and tells the kids to stay away from the beach from now on, grounding them. The kids angst on how life is unfair, but Dr. Ritter comforts them by telling the kids how Dr. Deep does care for them, but he's just stressed out from their job.
Don't be too hard on him, guys. Your uncle's got a lot on his plate right now. Things aren't going too well at the lab, and the university's calling him every day looking for results. The last thing he needs is more trouble. Wait, guys? Ritter!
He's the bad guy. Yep, no joke, your first guess as to who the true villain really is right on the money. Dr. Ritter is so obviously the bad guy. He's introduced, arguing with Dr. Deep over their experiment, dismisses the fact that their co-workers have gone missing, begs the doctor to not discontinue the project, is shown to be surprisingly skilled at capturing test subjects like he did this before, lies about the wet footprints being his own, and pretends to be a nice guy towards the kids to gain their trust. It's so obviously him. The show really desperately tries to fool us into believing that the creepy maid or Dr. Deep himself might be the bad guy hiding a dark secret, but Dr. Ritter is clearly the guilty party thanks to all the obvious hints. I didn't even read Deep Trouble 2 when I first saw this, and even I knew this guy had to be the twist villain. I guess all those years of watching Scooby-Doo cartoons improved my mystery-solving skills. Anyone who watches any children's mysteries knows that it's almost always the guy who acts far too nice towards everyone behind the secret evil schemes. No, I never thought the maid or Dr. Deep were capable of pulling off the master plans because the show kind of undercuts their own attempts to fake us out. Don't believe me? Well, we cut to the next day, where the kids play Uno because they're so bored. But the creepy maid finds out that somebody ate up her chocolate cake she baked for dinner, and she instantly blames the stupid kids for eating it, telling them that they're in trouble. Or should I say, in deep trouble. Right here, this one scene completely destroys any chances that the maid might be the bad guy. She finds out that somebody took her food and assumes it was the kids. This pretty much spells it out that the maid is not the master villain because she has no clue what's really going on around here. She has zero knowledge of the monsters out in the beaches and is totally in the dark about the Deep family's research. She's clearly not the true mastermind. This one scene demonstrates perfectly that she's ignorant to all the bizarre monsters. But what makes me irritated is that the show tries way too hard to make us believe that the maid is evil, but it fails. It fails so hard. I never once thought she was the true bad guy, even when I saw this as a silly third grader. The show itself gave away that she's not a villain before the first part even ends. And I have to ask, did anyone fall for this red herring? Did any of you ever think for even a split second that the maid might have been the twist villain? I didn't, especially when we get scenes like her noticing that her food is gone and blaming the kids for all the weird going-ons around here. This is an R.L. Stine story. We all know that there's supernatural monsters behind everything. You're not fooling anyone, Goosebumps. You're just padding out for extra time. This is the worst red herring I've ever seen since the show fails to make her seem evil outside of her acting like a jerk or giving odd faces to look sinister. It didn't fool anyone, and it was worse than the Fear Games misdirections. So the maid tells the kids to stop pissing her off and acts like a disgruntled employee just to make us think that she's evil because she doesn't like working for the Deeps.
And stay out of my kitchen. I'm not here to pick up after you two.
Yes, you are. You're a maid. Your job is to clean up after people. If you don't like it, just quit. This red herring fails so badly it hurts. So Billy gets pissed off about all these uncool adults and heads off to the beach, disobeying his uncle's orders.
Oh, man. Looks like the house is out of bounds, too. Where are you going?
Swimming.
Billy.
Stop, don't come back.
Oh, but while our badass rebel wanders around, he soon finds the missing chocolate cake, making him finally realize that something might be out here in the island with them. Oh no, the monsters ate their cake! What's next? Moving the furniture around? And we do get an honestly creepy scene with the off-screen monster stalking Billy in the dark forest as he tries getting away. It's actually pretty good. These scenes were easily my favorite part of the whole two-parter because they are genuinely frightening. We have a small boy running around a forest as monsters harass him from within the bushes and imply ill intent. It's very well done. Congrats, Goosebumps. These stalking children scenes were truly scary and unnerving, so the horror is still around for some good moments. Wait a minute. Wet footprints, stolen food, giant sharp teeth, uncharted ocean territory, savage mutant fish people? Oh no, it's the Piranha Walkers!
Really?
No, not really. I can't back that up.
Alright, maybe not the Piranha Walkers, but it does feel a lot like their motives, and it would have been super cool if those were the monsters of the week. Missed opportunity, guys. Billy makes it safely to the beach, but gets jump-scared by a dying guy shouting to get away from the water or else. Then he just dies.
The water. In the water.
Uncle Harold? Uncle Harold!
Alright, he lives. And it is actually a nice scary moment that jumpstarts the central conflict. The team rescues him and takes him back to recover, but the show soils on this moment when the maid still acts evil and spies on everyone. Ugh! Why? Why is she spying on them like a creeper? There is no reason for her to act like this. Goosebumps, you're not fooling anyone with this cheap fake-out character. She's not evil. We know she's totally unaware of the sea monsters and supernatural happenings, yet you still try to trick us into believing that she's a bad guy. It's not working. Tell me something. If the maid was seen in the room with everyone else tending to the dying guy, would it even make a difference? Would anyone care if the maid was in the room with them or spying on them healing a dying guy? As further proof on how pointless this red herring was, she gets called into the room to help anyway, so none of the other characters ever feel like she's an evildoer. Yeah, they call her in to help anyway, making it painfully clear that she's not a bad guy because they trust his life in her hands and she does heal him in the end. Thanks for making a worse red herring than Big Hero 6, iconic horror show. Meanwhile, the dying man hallucinates and mentions seeing a lady in the water. Not that one. But sadly, he passes out again. The family is soon forced to head out to find this lady in the water he mentioned before it's too late. And while it's a good tense moment here, the show still ruins it by making you think that the maid is the villain. The writers really want to fool us by implying that she's this lady in the water and had a role in this red shirt guy's injuries, but again, it fails in every way it can. The family entrusts the dying man's life in the hands of the maid while they scout the neighboring island, but it still undercuts the possibility of her being evil since the dying man has no reaction to her, demonstrating that she's not this lady in the water, and she still calls for help in the end, which no villain would ever do. But of course, she acts as evilly as possible.
That's strange. Lion's down again. I have to take the truck for help.
I'm totally not a bad guy. I promise. I'm going to take good care of you, sir. Seriously, why is she acting like this? It's just weak misdirecting. Spoiler, she actually does get help, making this weird moment all the more pointless. But I'm not sure if this dying guy lives or not, because we never ever see him again, so I'm not sure if he's alive or dead by the end. So I guess we'll count him as our first casualty. The team goes to check out the mysterious neighboring island, where Dr. Deep acts suspicious and ominously warns the kids to stay close together. But Dr. Ritter pulls out the betrayal card and dumps the Deeps on Death Island, telling the good doctor that he's weak and he'll be taking over the experiment now. Gasp! You mean that the guy who acted secretive and odd all day was really the bad guy? Who would have thunk it? While this betrayal scene is pretty decent, it gets kind of ruined by Ritter's less than stellar acting and his getaway.
You can't just leave us on this island, Ritter. This is insane.
Have a nice life. What's left of it?
Some kind of joke?
Bye-bye. I wish it was.
I'm acting. Ha 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 ha. Not helping is the slow speed of the stupid life raft. Seriously, he's slowly getting away in his grand exit. The show couldn't have cropped out the boat's 2 miles an hour speed. So Dr. Ritter was a traitor! And he abandons the family to die, as part 1 closes out with the Deeps trapped and being observed by the sea monsters. Oh no, protect your cakes! The first part was a tad slow on the build-up, but it did have some decent creepy moments and a foreboding atmosphere. However, things really pick up in part 2. Sadly, it's for the better and worst. Part 2 opens up with the Deep family very nonchalantly taking it well that they've been left for dead and calmly discussing the slim chances of getting off the island. While I'm glad the show has the Deeps behaving in a calm manner and actually keeping a level head on in a time of crisis, why are they all taking it well that Dr. Ritter, their close family friend, is evil and backstab them? There's seriously no emotional payoff behind Dr. Ritter ditching his coworker and kids who liked him to die on a death trap. Now, in the book, Dr. Ritter was just some guy who abducted the Deeps and had no personal link to them at all. But on the show, he was their friend, and the show gives no consequences or fallout to him ditching them to die. It just feels like a wasted opportunity. Why go through all the trouble of making the villain and heroes personally connected if you don't plan to do anything clever with it? You're better than that, horror show. So Dr. Deep gives a Dr. Quest-style exposition dump explaining everything. His science team came to this island to test a new trend of plankton, dubbed D13, which would solve world hunger because the plankton were bathed in a special mutagen which would cause the fish life that would eat it to grow to gigantic sized, like Godzilla gigantic sized. The giant animals grown by the D13 would then be killed, and the world would have enough food to feed billions of starving families everywhere. However, there was one catch. The scientists had no clue what effect the mutagen toxins would have on human life, whether it would spread by consuming mutant animal meat or make contact with human DNA, up until they tested it on their human test subjects. They discovered that the D13 would transform humans into half-fish, half-human hybrids, leading to several horrific consequences. Naturally, since poisoning humanity seemed like a bad selling point, Dr. Deep decided to pull the plug on the experiment, because this was power man was not meant to have. But the greedy Dr. Ritter took over the experiment now, where he intends to sell the D13 toxins on the black market anyway, to make a huge profit, ignoring all the dangers and effects it will have on the globe.
Why?
The oldest reason in the world. Money.
Yep. Our main villain is just a greedy Jurassic Park antagonist who wants to make a ton of money, and all the horrors are a result of him ignoring the long-term consequences of his research. Not a very deep villain. But I'll admit that it's pretty refreshing that the antagonist is simply a greedy jerk who doesn't just kill for fun, so I'll buy it. Sadly, that won't excuse the mutant monsters coming up. Before Dr. Deep goes on about the human test subjects, they find a boat, which was, of course, the lady in the water mentioned by the dying guy earlier. Wow, all this build-up and cheap misdirection for a marooned ship. Totally worth it! The Deeps very wisely search for a radio on the vessel, but Billy spots a strange figure in the woods. So of course, he goes out in the dark, deadly forest to check it out all alone. I see Billy is the world's greatest expert on getting killed in a horror story. Sheena and Dr. Deep find a canoe that looks a little too freshly used and new for being on a deserted isle, making them think that there's someone else on this island with them. But enough of that scene, because we cut to Billy being stalked by someone else on this island with them. Like I said the last time, the scenes of the kids being stalked in the scary woods are some of the truly gripping suspenseful scenes, since the show does the Jaws effect of concealing the monsters in the shadows, so it does feel scary when we don't know what they look like and what they're fully capable of. I also love how Billy's venturing out in the tall grass while the monsters hunt him like a wild predator. It adds a pretty dark layer of horror since the monster is tracking him like a primal beast. So well done, Goosebumps. Like a total moron, Billy heads deeper into the woods, discovering more mutagen everywhere, which somehow doesn't mutate him like the doctor said it would.
Great continuity.
And big shock, he gets captured. The worst part is that Billy was the hero of the original book and did pull off some smart moves, but here he's just a dumb kid who screws up a lot. Total downgrade. Also, the show missed a totally awesome opportunity here to reference Billy's twist ending in the first book. Come on, guys, at least show us some love for the source material. Only a few minutes later does it dawn on the family that, hey, Billy's gone, and they look around for him upon hearing his screams of agony. But all Sheena can find is his watch. which looks oddly intact for something that was in a violent struggle with a monster, but I suppose it's just monster-proof. We get a Scooby-Doo chase scene where the monsters pursue Sheena, but Dr. Deep jumps his niece from behind like a creeper to save her. I know you guys are running from monsters and all, but I think a simple tap on the shoulder would have been less stress-inducing. Dr. Deep warns her that they're in danger because the mutagen has infected the entire island. As proof of this, we see...
We have to fight Billy. Get away from here immediately.
I thought that was the idea.
I'm afraid things are worse than we thought. The D-13 flight that must have reached this island.
How do you know?
That's, wow. Just wow. I think now's a good time to talk about the CGI effects. They're just awful. These are, without a doubt, the worst special effects you'll ever see, people. And I know this might sound hard to believe, but even by Goosebumps standards, these effects are weak. I'm not an idiot. I know Goosebumps has been rather outmatched when it came to good special effects, mainly for their outrageous monsters, but they were very decent at the practical effects department. So whenever they tried to do the weirder stuff from the books that were beyond physical effects, they tended to fail horribly like these do. I said it before, but I'll say it again. Goosebumps was a rather low-budget TV show, and simply couldn't afford all of the greatest visual spectacles it wanted to. But we all loved it anyway, since the stories were actually great, and the ideas that they were able to convey on screen, well, managed to be entertaining surprises. Their practical effects were some of the best ever. Deep Trouble seemed like it was waiting in the back of the line for a long time because the book version was very crazy. There are giant mutant kaiju in the source material, and I do respect that the show wanted to make it come to life for the fans. Sadly, this did not work out. As some of my film buffs with keen eyes can detect, the giant monsters are very clearly Petco pets being posed in front of a green screen, and the actors are reacting to nothing standing in place for the giants. It's all very bad green screen effects with trained pets, but the poor Photoshop just makes it even more laughably bad. If you still don't know what I mean, then let's talk about my favorite scene. Here, I just love how the giant lizard's tail floats above the ocean water. Look at that. Its tail is just hovering above the ocean there. Since, as we all know, lizards can defy gravity that way. My point is that some of these effects don't mesh well. It looks and feels like photoshopped animals are just posing for YouTube videos. I kinda feel like this episode could have been all the more better if the show actually kept the beasts slightly off screen and had them as an unseen force to dread, similar to the dragon from the girl in the painting. The Haunting Hour realized that its CGI was not A+ quality, and their episodes worked out infinitely better by using the unseen monsters to their benefit. But sadly, Goosebumps wanted to impress the kids and book fans, resulting in all this meme fodder. Bottom line, the CGI effects sucked, even back when this show aired on TV, and it tragically costed this tale the gold.
Oh, come on, Cat. You gotta admit, the effects here are still better than Will Smith's Aladdin.
I'm sorry, House, but I can't. I just can't give something with these effects a gold medal. It changes everything into a so bad it's good story. People like my brother Wolf actually tell me that they love this episode precisely because of the bad effects, since they are very funny. But as a serious critic, I have to say no. They're funny bad like Tommy was so, but when it comes to my ranking, I can't look you all in the eye and still say that this was golden stuff. The show should have gone with the sea mutants instead. Speaking of which, Dr. Deep and Sheena run off while we all miss the epic giant monster fight between a large lizard and a king crab. What? Why?
Probably really expensive. Incredibly expensive. This is an impressive fight, though. Glad I'm facing towards it. That was the best part.
The duo hide in a cabin in the woods. Not that one. And they employ the Jurassic Park tactic of staying quietly still to hide from the lizard's vision. Why are you shushing her? You were the one making noises, you dope!
You big dummy.
So the kaiju takes off, where Dr. Deep then tries to convince Sheena to leave the island with him to get help. But when she refuses, the doctor gets trapped by the monsters, who drag him down to the depths below. And they apparently give up on taking Sheena for some reason. Yeah, they try once and give up. Not very motivated monsters, are they? But our strong, independent woman, Sheena of the jungle, decides to finally step up, face those ugly monsters once and for all, and dives head-on into the cave to save the guys. Woo! Hashtag feminism! Sorry, I do that gag every time to point out how strong female heroes do exist in media without feeling forced. Like they are now. Bazinga! As Sheena explores the dark cave, we come upon my brother Wolf's favorite scene of the whole story arc. Where's Jake the Snake when you need him? After escaping the Resident Evil boss, Sheena spots some hooded cultists walking around, but soon bumps into Billy, who somehow escaped the evil mutants who captured him earlier with no explanation whatsoever.
I escaped somehow. Let's go.
Wow. That has got to be the laziest writing I've ever seen on Goosebumps. Come on, writers. We couldn't have Sheena kick butt and save the boys by herself. We had to have the other kid hero just appear out of nowhere despite his tough predicament earlier. We don't even get a scene of Billy escaping on his own. He just shows up for a cheap jump scare.
Lame.
Oh well, who cares? The Deep siblings are reunited, but as they hide, they bump into a giant ant from the awesome Ant's Tale. Yes, yes, consume the human child. Oh yeah, I'm back, buggies. Hey, you know, the giant ant puppet actually looks pretty good. You know why? Because it's actually physically there in the shot with them. But the kids are saved by a hooded stranger, Mr. Spock style, where the stranger reveals that he's actually Louise, the missing lab assistant mentioned earlier, who reveals that he's been here all along because he's now a fish mutant. Wait, that's what he looks like? I mean, I know he's horrified about how he's an octopus man now, but honestly, his mutation doesn't even look that grotesque. I dare say that he looks strangely attractive for a fish man.
You are curiously attractive for a fishman.
So, the strangely attractive fish man tells the kids that it's okay because he's really a nice fish mutant who held on to his sanity and knows that the Deep family are innocent. He says that he knows Dr. Ritter is the real bad guy because a few weeks ago, the evil doctor tested the serum on him to secretly see how the D13 would affect humans, promising a load of money for doing it. But when it turned him into a fish mutant, Ritter dumped him on the island to die along with all the other mutant freaks who are disfigured by the mutagen to cover up the failed experiment. However, Dr. Ritter tricked them all into believing that Dr. Deep was in on it too, since their uncle's name was on all their checks and documents, making the mutants assume that the Deep family were all evil as well. However, this was all an elaborate plan Dr. Ritter arranged to turn both his enemies against each other, while he'd get away scot-free with the serum and all the money. That's actually a pretty devious villain plan. Good job making the villain's motivations make sense, Goosebumps. I'm pleasantly surprised. Anyways, Louise, the token good teammate among the mutant fish folk, warns the kids that they must leave because their uncle Dr. Deep is scheduled for execution, as the fishmen blame him for their tragic fate. But of course, the kids decide to go back for him and save the day.
That's the problem with superheroes. They're too heroic.
They make it to the trial grounds, where the fishmen threaten Dr. Deep, revealing their scary faces.
What are you? What do you want? Justice. Justice. Nice to see you again, Dr. Deep.
Now, it would be a crime if I didn't point out how good these costumes and makeup are, since they were a major saving grace in this episode. The mutant fish folk honestly look pretty fantastic. A bit cheesy, yes, but for a kid's show, the designs of their masks and makeup look pretty darn cool. They do look like realistic, half-human, half-mutant monsters, and are very intimidating. They appear 1,000 times better than the CGI beasts do, so it was a blessing to have them at all because they are awesome R.L. Stine monsters. I love it. Now, they were not characters from the book, since the mutagen only turned people into full-on animals, but I think the show made a good change by having them, since it does add a monstrous layer of wickedness to Dr. Ritter's character than he had in the novel. The hard work the show put on the Monster Men was a pretty grand sight to behold, and is a major reason why I don't think this episode was totally worthless, despite the idiotic kid heroes and laughable kaiju effects. So I applaud how the costumes and makeup department gave this their all, since it was amazing. And one of them is a piranha walker. Yay, I wasn't being stupid after all. We got a piranha man. Correction, a piranha man, an octopus man, a lobster man, and a sea urchin beast. Awesome mutants, Goosebumps. I'd buy toys of them all. Even one of that strangely attractive fish man.
Has anyone ever told you that you're strangely attractive for a fish man?
Get out of here, Femwolf. Plus, from a writing standpoint, the monsters are shockingly very good tragic villains. They were all co-workers who worked under Dr. Deep and Ritter, but ended up betrayed and mutated by the unprepared chemicals. Then they were left for dead on an island filled with feral giants, but hid underground to plot their revenge on the men who did this to them. So not only are they very well designed villains, but they are also very well written. Props to the show for providing kids with cool monsters that have feelings and lives trampled on. So it did make the story deep. Okay, I'll stop. This was the plot twist. The monsters are the good guys, and the true ugly monster was a greedy human being who played God and endangered everyone. Back in the plot, the fishmen tell Deep that he will be punished for his crimes by feeding him to a giant spider.
I created D13 to help mankind, not to destroy it. Ritter's the one you want. I didn't know that he was conducting the tests on humans. And what a ripoff. Oh, it's totally fake.
You know, I probably would have been scared of this if Lord of the Rings didn't do this better a few years later. Before he can be spider food, the kids show up just in time to save the doc, where they tell the fishmen the painfully obvious, that Dr. Ritter is the master criminal, and he used everyone. They informed them that Dr. Ritter stole the D13 formula, he sent the Deep family here to die, lied to everyone, faked the signatures on their checks and documents, and did it all to illegally sell the mutagen on the black market. And he would have gotten away with it, if it hadn't been for those meddling kids and their stupid fish. As proof of their argument, they point out the biggest problem if Dr. Deep was really the true villain. If the Deep family were evil, then why would they come to a death island willingly knowing that it was populated by the mutant monsters who hated them? Which makes the fishmen finally realize, hey, you're right! Seriously, the fishmen never once thought that Ritter, the man who was testing the drug on them, might have been evil too? What? They worked closely to this guy for years, but never once questioned his suspicious nature? Huh? Now that I think about it, maybe I should open my own eyes to all the villains who work with me, especially that treacherous brother of mine, Wolf. He's becoming a real Starscream lately. Maybe I should replace him.
Replace me?
I also want to bring up that scene I held on to from part 1, where the fish mutants were the ones stalking and breaking into the Deep Beach house. Apparently, the fishmen who hated Dr. Deep and desired to kill him for years could break into his place whenever they wanted to, but for some reason never killed or questioned him over his alleged crimes. These fish mutants had a boat, suspected that their boss might have been corrupt, and could breach his home at any time they wanted, yet they never got their revenge until now. What was the point of showing the fish folk watching the kids and the house the whole time, but all they did was troll the family by leaving messes and eating their cake? They never bothered to steal back the D13 formula, destroy his lab equipment, or burn his house down? The kids actually had to solve the mystery and their revenge scheme for them. Geez, let's face it, these fishmen just don't have the same detective skills as Sunset Shimmer.
Sunset Shimmer, certified detective.
And just like that, the fishmen instantly believe they're innocent after all, and turn good now.
You always win when you are good.
Hooray, the mutants are good guys now. The Deep family is set free, and we get our satisfying ending with the fish mutants coming for Ritter. Who's packing up his car? Wait, Why are you packing up all your stuff in your car? You're on an island! But I won't deny, this chase scene is pretty satisfying nonetheless. Dr. Ritter sees that the monsters are after him and tries running away, but it's too late.
Hello, Dr. Ritter. Going somewhere?
No, that's where it would have ended if this was a Tales from the Crypt episode, but we do get some closure. We get a time skip to a few weeks later, where we see that the Deeps have cured Louise and all the poor fishmen. Yep, all our monster men are humans once more. They proceed to dump the antidote all across the ocean floor to cure all the kaiju giants out there. The family are friends with the victims now, D13 is shut down, and everyone lives happily ever after, where Dr. Deep promises his kids that he'll give them the vacation they deserve, since they're done with mutating humans for a while now. I heard he's passed his research on to some guy named Professor Mac Krill, who I'm sure won't do anything bad with it at all. So yay, this Goosebumps tale ends on a happy ending for our heroes and our tragic victims for once. That's kind of a shock for a horror story. But as everyone chillaxes, they question whatever happened to that evil Dr. Ritter, where we cut to a circus, being hosted by the disgruntled maid? I guess she found her true calling. But we see that the maid has a special attraction, a mutant fishman that everyone can see for $1, where we see Dr. Ritter, who was transformed into a mutant himself and is now the true monster he is physically. You see, he turned innocent people into fish freaks, then kept them trapped forever. But now, he himself was turned into a fish freak by his own former victims, who also trapped him forever, and is mocked by the public, who he was going to scam. Alright, Goosebumps, I actually did like the satisfying karmic twist ending here. For those of you who don't know, in the book, Dr. Ritter actually got away. When the Deep family outwits him and back him into a corner, he willingly drinks the D13, turns into a fish, and swims away in the Great Sea, never to be seen again. I think they were going to set him up for a future sequel, but so far, R.L. Stine never did one, and the twist of the book is a vague one where Sheena thinks that she became a mutant fish person too, after mixing up her drink with the D13. Not exactly the best twist, but the ending was a tad underwhelming. I actually prefer what the show did. There's sort of this brilliant poetic justice about a corrupt scientist getting turned into a failed experiment himself by his own victims. So I did love that the finale to Goosebumps had a villain getting a dark twist ending for a change. So bravo, Goosebumps. The audience is satisfied with this change, and it does all close out for good, without any sequel bait. Yet that was the end to the series finale two-parter Goosebumps adaptation, Deep Trouble. How does it hold up? Well, it doesn't. At least a good half of it doesn't. Do I really need to say it again? The CGI is easily the worst part of this episode. While I appreciate how the show did at least get real animals and recorded them, the harsh truth is that the results were a failure. It's way too silly for most viewers, children and adults, to take seriously. It really feels like a so bad it's good cheesy B-movie, which some people do love about this, but personally I don't, since it held back this tale quite a few times. Overall, this story really feels like a Johnny Quest plot written by R.L. Stine. It has the corny adventure, the over-the-top plot, greedy mad scientists, simple mystery storytelling, a supernatural tone, and goofy fun that one would find right out of the cartoon. However, it does have a ton of redeeming traits as well. The fishmen are awesome looking. Their backstory is pretty nice and depressing. The idea of a monster island is enjoyable, and the show did try its hardest to make this episode be taken seriously. My favorite part is how the writers gave the villain his karma in the end compared to what the book did with its ending. It did show me that there was real care put in. That being said, the episode itself is nothing grand, especially when you remember that this was the last ever Goosebumps TV story. Nothing about it feels like a final send-off or goodbye for the loyal fans. It's just another run-of-the-mill Goosebumps adventure. I believe that the show was completely unaware that this was their final story, and this ended up being a typical adventure plot, because the show thought they would be making a few more episodes after this one. If anyone asks me, I think the final episode of the show should have been The Ghost Next Door, since that was one of the best two-parters in the series. It ends on an uplifting note, and it feels much more like a final farewell to the fans than Deep Trouble did. It's kind of like Grandpa's glasses that way. However, if you wondered what I thought of this as a series finale to Goosebumps, well, I confess that it was not a good one, simply because it's just another horror adventure and not this grand emotional conclusion. It's not the show's fault, so I can't complain too much, but it was a tad depressing that the show was cancelled after this plot. Regardless, if you look at this story as its own thing, it's just okay. It was okay. Deep Trouble is seen as a love it or hate it episode. Most people hate it because of the awful effects and lackluster storytelling, but some people love it because it did have some interesting, cool concepts and was pretty entertaining for the kiddos. I thought it was alright. It does have a lot of bad concepts and technical issues in it, but it did have some great stuff too. I love the costumes and makeup, the well-tied-together impressive conclusion, the Johnny Quest vibes, but the effects and some of the build-up were pretty sloppy. The mystery in Part 1 is not very good. The painfully obvious red herrings, fake-outs, jump scares, lazy writing, idiot moments, and negative continuity just held back the plot. I think it would have been better if the main characters arrived at the island halfway into Part 1 instead of bumming around for half the time and doing all the stupid misdirections with the moronic maid. It wasted too much screen time and was not done well. The Monster Island was where all the good stuff happened. Couldn't they have just uncovered Dr. Ritter's evil doing on the island itself instead and be chased by kaiju earlier on? Since that's where the intense conflict finally grew. However, they don't do that. Part 1 tries to be a build-up episode to get us excited for Part 2, and while the second half was better, it made some elements of the first part irrelevant and pointless. I wish the show would have just did what the book did. Make it clear that Dr. Ritter was the bad guy instead of beating around the bad mystery, since that could have kick-started the fun sooner. But nope, they didn't do that. However, when we do get to Monster Island, it's much more entertaining and moves at a faster pace. So in the end, the good and the bad evened out for me. This is not an adaptation of Deep Trouble 1, but is a sort of combination of both books to make it easier for the non-book fans to get absorbed into it. I have no clue why they changed the title when they didn't do that with Night of the Living Dummy, but I guess it was a marketing choice rather than a mistake. So, Deep Trouble 2, the episode, is okay. Lots of silly stuff, but some good stuff too, making it all the more bearable. Much like the effects, it's an incredibly goofy experience, but you can't help but enjoy its ridiculousness anyway. It's still a decent Goosebumps tale, but a rather weak series finale. So, I give the series finale, Deep Trouble, a silver skull. It's simply an alright sci-fi adventure plot. It has a fun cartoony conflict, awesome tragic monsters, a riveting story arc, some creepy moments, and cool ideas. However, it's also plagued by bad effects, a predictable mystery, some idiotic decisions, and a lack of going all out with its madness. By the end, Deep Trouble is pretty even in both good and bad elements. I think children might enjoy it, but there's not too much here to bring back adults who want something more than a so bad it's good Star Trek episode. Wolf and I mostly like the tale for its bad effects, but the monster story is pretty decent, so it was the kind of experience that got better as it went along. It's not a horrendous dumpster fire, but it's also not the most noteworthy Goosebumps episode ever compared to the superior fan favorites. What more can I say? Deep Trouble tried to be something outstanding and fun by heading off into the great unknown, but it barely made it across some shallow waters. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, or just tune in for more videos posted here on Wolf Entertainment. I'm your host, Catastrophe, and I hope we all find more tales out there with something greater under the surface.
Attractive for a fishman. So I've been told.